Before we start, please subscribe and like the video. The thing about a collapsing star is that you don't see it coming all at once. The light just starts to dim, slowly, imperceptibly. At first, you might notice the color is a little different, less vibrant. The heat on your skin feels a bit cooler, but you're so used to the constant, blinding brilliance that you rationalize it. It's just an atmospheric change, you tell yourself. The dust has shifted, the universe is a complicated place, and maybe this is just a phase. You don't realize the star itself is dying until the light goes out completely and you're left in a darkness so profound it feels like a physical weight. The silence deafening where a roar once was. That's how it was with Lila. With us. We'd been together for 9 years. A decade if you count the messy, unsure first year of college when we were just two kids trying to figure out if our shared love for late-night coffee and old vinyl records was enough. It turned out it was, or, at least, it was enough for a long, quiet, comfortable stretch of time. Our life was a series of small, shared rituals, a specific way we folded the towels, the half-hour of silence on the couch every evening after dinner, both of us reading separate books, the way she would always leave one single coffee bean on the counter next to the grinder, a tiny, dark tribute to the morning I was Liam Thatcher, the man who built our home in a way that it never needed fixing, not literally. Though I was good with a wrench, but emotionally, I was the steady ground. I was the silent partner in a dance that never needed music, a rhythm we both knew without conscious thought. And Lila Montgomery, she was the laughter and the light. She was the one who could make a grocery run feel like an adventure and a rainy Sunday afternoon feel like a warm, secret victory. That's who she was, or who I thought she was. The dimming began so slowly. I can't even pinpoint the exact day. It was just a small shift, like the weather turning colder without a storm. Her phone, once a casual object left on the kitchen counter, became an extension of her hand. A small, glowing fortress she defended with a password she changed twice in a month. She'd always been a creature of habit, but her new habits were foreign. Her laughter, once an open, unrestrained sound that filled a room, became a quiet, conspiratorial giggle into a device. She'd disappear for hours, getting coffee with friends, and come back with an energy I didn't recognize, a kind of nervous, buzzing excitement that would suddenly deflate the moment she walked through the door. I'd be sitting there, watching a documentary, and she'd walk in, drop her keys, and the whole atmosphere would change. The air would thicken with a silent question I couldn't formulate, a tension that felt like a low hum in my teeth. She'd see me, and the light would go out of her eyes, replaced with a kind of practiced neutrality. She'd say, "Hey," in a tone that sounded more like a greeting to a stranger than to the person she shared a life with. The warmth was gone. It was like she had just finished a long, beautiful conversation with someone else, and I was the cold shower she had to endure afterward. I remember one specific Tuesday evening. We were eating takeout on the couch, watching a show we both liked, or we used to. She wasn't watching. Her eyes were fixed on her phone, which she was holding just below the level of the coffee table, a tiny, glowing secret. The blue light cast an unnatural pallor on her face. I paused the show. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice as neutral as I could make it, trying to hide the tremor of a question I was too afraid to ask. She flinched, the phone dropping a few inches, her face snapping up to mine. "Yeah, fine," she said, too quickly. The smile she put on was a mask, a flimsy piece of paper she'd painted on. It didn't reach her eyes. She picked up her fork, pushed a piece of lo mein around her plate. "Just checking work emails, you know." I nodded. I didn't know. Her work emails were never this important, never this secret. My work was different. I was a structural engineer for a firm that specialized in building bridges. My days were about stress tolerances, load calculations, the sheer, beautiful physics of holding things up against impossible odds. My life, my work, my love, had always been about stability. Now, I was staring at a crack in the foundation of my own home, and I couldn't figure out the calculation to fix it. The feeling of her pulling away was like a slow-motion car crash. You see the other car coming, but you can't steer away, you just brace for the impact, watching the world shatter in the windshield. I started doing things differently to compensate. I cooked her favorite meals. I'd buy her flowers on a random Wednesday. I tried to initiate conversation, to pull her back to me, to us. My every action was a plea, a desperate attempt to patch the hole that was growing between us. I'd ask her about her day, and she'd give me one-word answers. I'd touch her arm, and she'd flinch. The physical distance was the worst. We still slept in the same bed, but she was a continent away. She'd turn her back to me, curl into a tight ball, and I'd lie there, listening to the quiet sound of her breathing, feeling the chasm between us grow wider with every second. I started to notice how she looked at herself in the mirror, a new scrutiny, a new obsession with her appearance. She bought new lingerie, not for me, but for some version of herself I didn't recognize, a woman who looked a little more dangerous, a little more alive. The perfume was a new scent, too, something floral, sharp. It didn't smell like home, it smelled like a first date. I'd lie awake and watch the digital clock tick past 3 in the morning. The numbers a red, relentless reminder of the time. My mind was a whirlwind of memories, running through our 9 years together, trying to find a mistake, a moment where I had let the foundation crack. Was it that time I forgot her birthday? That was 6 years ago, the time I was too busy with work and didn't help her with her parents' anniversary party. It was all so long ago, buried under years of good memories, but now, they all felt like ghosts. I was haunted by a life I thought we had, a life that was slowly, silently, becoming a fiction. The truth was, there was no single moment, there was no grand, catastrophic failure, there was just a slow, quiet erosion. The love was not a bridge that collapsed in a single, dramatic moment. It was a coastline, slowly being eaten away by a tide I couldn't see, a tide that was slowly, relentlessly pulling her away from me. I was left standing on a small, crumbling island, the water rising around my ankles, and all I could do was watch. The air in the apartment became a physical thing, thick and heavy with unsaid words. It had a different weight to it now, a coldness that seeped into the furniture, the blankets, the very bones of the building. The comfortable silence we had once shared, filled with the soft rustle of book pages and the low hum of the refrigerator, had been replaced by a tense, brittle quiet. Now, the quiet was a predator, lurking in the corners of every room. It was the space between her words, the lack of a response to my own. It was the sound of her fingers tapping against her phone screen, the tiny, percussive rhythm of a secret life I couldn't access. Lila started spending more time with her phone, but not just the phone itself. She was on a new energy, a new wavelength. She'd come home from work, and instead of the usual tired sigh and the slow, deliberate unknotting of her hair, she'd have this buzzing, restless energy. She'd put on music she'd never listened to before, something loud and beat-driven, and she would start dancing around the living room, a wild, almost frantic joy that felt alien in our quiet space. She would talk about her coworkers, but in a way that seemed to exclude me from the conversation, as if I were a distant acquaintance she was updating. I remember her mentioning a man named Mason Carlisle, just a passing reference at first, an anecdote about a funny comment he'd made at a team meeting. But then his name started appearing more often. Mason said this. Mason thought that. His name became a small stone, a weight in my stomach. I tried to engage, to ask more about this person, this new presence in our lives, but she'd wave it away, saying, "Oh, it's just work stuff, you wouldn't get it," with a dismissive air that was more painful than a direct insult. I started to feel like a child being told to go to my room, out of the way of the adults. I started to doubt my own reality. Was I being paranoid? Was I imagining all of this? I went to my friend, Ethan Vaughn, for advice, or maybe just for a different perspective. We sat in a small bar downtown, the kind of place that smelled of old wood and cheap beer, and I told him, in vague terms, about the distance I was feeling. I didn't say the word cheating. I couldn't bring myself to say it. It felt too real, too sharp, too final. I just said, "It's like we're speaking different languages. Like I'm not who she wants to talk to anymore." Ethan, who had been married for 2 years and had seen his own share of struggles, listened patiently, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. He didn't offer any grand platitudes. He just said, "Sometimes people get lonely, even when they're not alone." His words didn't make me feel better. They made me feel worse, because he was speaking to a truth I couldn't face. We were in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, but we were both profoundly, tragically alone. I started to observe her like a detective. My work as a structural engineer had trained me to see cracks, to identify weak points, to understand the physics of failure. I saw them everywhere. The way her eyes would light up when she got a text message, the way she'd hurry to the bathroom to take a call, the way she would come home late, her hair smelling faintly of a scent I couldn't place, a scent that wasn't hers. I'd try to find her phone, to see for myself, but it was always in her pocket, her purse, under her pillow. It was a small, cruel game of hide and seek, and I was the only one playing. I felt a desperation to prove myself wrong, to find some proof that my fear was a lie, that this was all just a phase, a misunderstanding. But every observation, every tiny detail, was a nail in the coffin. The final nail, the one that sealed my fate, was a business trip she took, a conference she had to attend in Chicago for a week. She was so excited, so full of a youthful, breathless energy I hadn't seen in years. She packed her bags, humming a song I didn't know. I drove her to the airport, and on the way, she was on her phone, a grin on her face as she typed. She looked beautiful, she looked happy, she looked like she was going to meet someone, not to a work conference. I saw her off at the terminal, and she hugged me, but the hug felt perfunctory, a formality. She kissed me on the cheek, not the lips, and her eyes were already looking past me, toward the security gate, toward her new life. I drove home, the passenger seat an abyss of silence and regret. The apartment was a tomb. It smelled of her perfume, the new one, the one that wasn't hers. The silence was overwhelming, but it was different now. It was not the silence of a house, but the silence of a void. It was the silence after the collapse. I sat on the couch, the same couch where we had spent countless hours, and I felt the weight of 9 years of history pressed down on me. The memories all feeling like lies. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the empty space beside me. My mind replayed every moment, every word, every look, every gesture. I saw the cracks that I had ignored, the signs I had dismissed. I saw the ghost of the man I used to be, the man who believed in our love, the man who was so calm and steady that he didn't see the hurricane coming until it was already here. I realized then that the truth was not something I had to find, but something I had to admit to myself. The star was not just dimming, it was already dead. The final piece of the puzzle came into my possession not through a dramatic fight or a tearful confession, but with a quiet, devastating finality that felt almost polite in its cruelty. She had been gone for 3 days on her so-called business trip, and the apartment, once an echo chamber of my anxieties, had become a space of strange, hollow peace. It was a peace born of knowing, though I hadn't yet fully admitted the truth to myself. I was living in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the other shoe to drop. My mind, ever the structural engineer, was running diagnostics, re-examining the entire history of our relationship, looking for the weak points. Every memory was now a piece of evidence, every conversation a transcribed testimony. The small, quiet moment of realization happened in the kitchen, of all places. I was making coffee, and I noticed a small, black notebook lying on the counter, half hidden beneath a stack of mail. Lila was a meticulous planner, a list maker, and this was one of her many journals. Usually, they were filled with grocery lists, project deadlines for her design job, or the occasional doodle. I had never felt the need to look inside. Our trust was built on a foundation of open doors and shared lives. But this time, my hand, almost without my conscious command, reached for it. It was the physical manifestation of my quiet desperation. I flipped through the pages, and the first few were mundane, just as I had expected. A list of things to buy, a note to call her mother, and then, in the middle of a page, my eyes caught a name, a familiar name, Mason Carlisle. My heart, a thing I had thought was dormant, gave a sharp, painful lurch in my chest. Below his name were bullet points, but they weren't about work. They were about places. Edison Park, the Blue Door Cafe, Millennium Park. Dates were next to them, dates that perfectly aligned with her. Late nights with friends. Or her. Coffee runs. I continued to read, my breath catching in my throat. I found a reference to a hotel, a specific room number, and the words, "The first time it felt like coming home." That was it. No grand confession, no dramatic confrontation, just a small, black notebook and a few lines of script that dismantled my entire world. It was a surgical, clean, and utterly devastating blow. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. The feeling that washed over me was not anger, not grief, but a profound, almost peaceful emptiness. It was the calm after the storm, the moment you realize you've survived but lost everything. I felt the floor give way beneath my feet, but I didn't fall. I just stood there, the notebook in my hands, a tiny, dark object that held the entirety of my ruined life. The coffee machine finished its brew, the last drop hitting the pot with a soft, final hiss. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. I walked out of the kitchen, the notebook still in my hands, and sat on the couch, the very spot where we had shared so much of our lives. My mind, a place that was once a library of shared memories, was now a burnt-out ruin. I started to replay everything, but this time, with the knowledge of Mason Carlisle, the late nights, the phone habits, the new perfume, the nervous energy, the laugh she reserved for her screen. It all made a cold, terrible sense. My quiet observations weren't paranoia, they were the truth, and the truth was a knife I had been holding to my own chest all this time. I looked at the photograph on the mantelpiece, a picture of us on our wedding day, standing on a bridge I had helped design. We were laughing, our hands were linked, our eyes were full of a naive, beautiful belief in a shared future. I looked at the man in the picture, at his youthful, confident smile, and I felt a pang of pity for him, for the man who had no idea what was coming. I looked at Lila, her face glowing, her eyes full of a promise she had already, 1,000 times over, broken. I took the picture frame in my hands, and I didn't smash it, I didn't throw it, I just held it, and I let the tears finally come. They were not tears of anger, but tears of mourning. I was mourning for the man I used to be, for the woman I thought she was, for the life we had built, for the love I had believed in. I was mourning for a reality that never existed, for a house built on a fault line. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the tears a silent, steady stream, the coffee growing cold in the pot. The truth was not a monster I had to fight. It was a ghost I had to learn to live with. I had always been the steady ground, the one who held things up. Now, I was the one who had collapsed. My universe was dark. The star of my life was gone, and all I could do was sit in the quiet, profound darkness and feel the cold. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something real, something honest. I felt the slow, quiet, peaceful devastation of a broken heart, and it was enough. The days that followed her return were a blur of performance and painful observation. I had not confronted her. The small, black notebook remained a secret in the back of a drawer, a tiny, dark object that held the entirety of my broken world. I had not said a word. What was there to say? "I read your diary and know about Mason Carlisle." The words felt cheap and small, insufficient for the scale of the destruction. I had moved into a state of quiet, surgical detachment. My emotions, once a tangled mess of hope, anxiety, and quiet desperation, had settled into a kind of frozen clarity. I was no longer an active participant in our relationship. I was an observer, a ghost in my own life. I watched her, really watched her. As she moved through our apartment, the home we had built, she would hum to herself, her hands in the sink, her mind 1,000 miles away. She would talk about her work trip, the meetings, the networking, the long, boring nights in the hotel room. Every word was a tiny, sharp lie, and I would just nod, my face a blank mask of feigned interest. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. She was lying to me to protect me, or so she thought. But the truth was that the lies were now the only thing connecting us. Every lie was a new strand in a web of deceit, and I was caught in the middle, watching her spin it with a practiced ease. I started to notice how our life was built on a series of small, shared habits that were now performed with a chilling disassociation. We still ate dinner together, but she would be on her phone, typing with a secret smile. We still watched the same shows, but her eyes would be vacant, her mind somewhere else entirely. We still slept in the same bed, but she would turn away from me, a continent away, and I would lie there, the silence between us a living, breathing thing. I couldn't bring myself to touch her. The thought of it, the thought of her body, which I knew was now a stranger to me, filled me with a cold, hollow revulsion. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was a fiction. The person who was now living in my home was an imposter, and the cruelest part was that she was so good at it. My internal monologue, once a whirlwind of questions and doubts, had now become a quiet, resigned commentary on the play we were both in. I was the audience, and she was the lead actress, and the performance was a masterpiece of deception. I started to find solace in the small, mundane tasks of my life. I'd spend hours in the garage, fixing my old Honda, my hands covered in grease and oil. The car was a thing of logic and order, a thing that could be broken and fixed, a thing that made sense. I could understand the mechanics of an engine, the precise physics of a well-oiled machine. It was a comfort to work on something that didn't lie, something that didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. The world outside the garage, the world of Lila and our shattered life, was a world of chaos and lies, a world I could no longer navigate. I started to talk to Ethan Vaughn again, but not about her. I talked about my car, about the new projects at work, about the weather. I was building a new life, a new identity, one that was separate from her. I was slowly, painstakingly, prying myself free from the wreckage of our relationship. One night, she came home late, and the perfume, the sharp, floral scent, was stronger than usual. She came into the living room, where I was reading a book, and she sat down on the other side of the couch. A physical chasm between us, she said. I think we need to talk. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, and for a second, a flicker of hope, a tiny, desperate flame, sparked in my chest. Was she going to confess? Was she going to be honest? I just looked at her, my face a mask of neutrality. She continued. I've been so distant lately. I know I'm feeling a little lost. She was crying now, soft, silent tears, and a part of me, the part of me that still loved the woman she used to be, wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but I couldn't. I just sat there, my book in my hands, and I watched her. She was not crying because she had cheated. She was crying because she was caught, because the web of her lies was unraveling, because the performance was becoming too hard to maintain. She was mourning her own freedom, not the loss of our love. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, my silence a wall, a barrier, a final, unbreachable defense. The silence stretched between us, a living, breathing thing, and in that silence, she finally understood. She wasn't talking to the man who would comfort her, the man who would fix it. She was talking to a ghost, a witness to her crime, and there was nothing left for her to say. She just sat there, her tears a testament to her own self-pity, and I sat there, my heart a hollow, empty space. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt nothing at all. The quiet, painful process of detaching from our shared life became my full-time occupation. It was a slow, deliberate dismantling, like a team of demolition workers carefully taking apart a condemned building, piece by piece, to avoid collateral damage. The apartment, once a monument to our love, became a museum of our past. I would walk through the rooms and see ghosts everywhere. The spot on the wall where we had hung a picture of us in Italy, the kitchen counter where we had shared so many late-night conversations, the couch where we had spent countless hours. Every object, every piece of furniture, every corner of the room was a memory, a story, a testament to a life we had once had, and now they were all just relics, artifacts of a past that was not mine anymore. I started to spend my evenings away from the apartment. I'd go for long, solitary walks in the city, the cold night air a comfort against my skin. I'd listen to music I hadn't heard in years, the kind of music that reminded me of my own identity, the person I was before Lila. I started to reconnect with the man I had been, the man who was not just a partner, but a person with his own thoughts, his own interests, his own life. The self-healing was not a linear process. It was a series of small, quiet victories, and a series of devastating, heartbreaking setbacks. There were days when the grief would hit me like a wave, and I'd find myself on the floor, the tears a hot, painful stream, the memories of her, the woman I thought she was, a fresh wound. But then, there were days when I would feel a moment of clarity, a small, quiet moment of peace. I'd be walking down the street, and I'd see a couple holding hands, and I wouldn't feel a pang of jealousy or a stab of pain. I'd just see them, two people, and I'd feel a strange, detached calm. It was not a sign that I was over it. It was a sign that I was starting to heal. My friend, Ethan Vaughn, became an unexpected anchor in the storm. We would meet for coffee or a beer, and we would talk, but not about her. We talked about my work, about my car, about his new projects. He knew, I think, he could see the wreckage of my life in my eyes, but he didn't pity me. He didn't offer any grand words of wisdom. He just offered his presence, his quiet, steady friendship, and it was enough. He was a safe place, a place where I didn't have to pretend, a place where I could just be. And that was all I needed. The conversation, the final, quiet, devastating conversation, happened on a Sunday afternoon. She came into the living room, where I was sitting, reading a book, and she sat down in the armchair across from me. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just sat there, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. I knew what was coming. I had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it, but when it finally came, it was not the dramatic confrontation I had expected. It was a quiet, almost tender surrender. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice a small, broken whisper. It was not an apology for what she had done. It was an apology for what she was about to do. "I can't do this anymore, this pretending. I can't." I just looked at her, my face a blank mask of neutrality. "I know," I said. It was all I had to say. She looked up at me, her eyes full of tears, and a flicker of a new emotion, an emotion I hadn't seen in a very long time, crossed her face. Not regret, not sorrow, relief. She was relieved. She was relieved that she didn't have to pretend anymore. She was relieved that she was free, and in that moment, I realized that I was too. I was relieved that I didn't have to watch the slow, quiet, painful death of my love anymore. I was relieved that I could finally stop being a ghost in my own life. I stood up, walked to the hallway, and grabbed my coat. She looked at me, her face a mask of confusion. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I'm going for a walk," I said, "and then I'm not coming back." Her face crumbled. The tears that came now were real, I think. They were not for the loss of our love, but for the loss of her safety, the loss of her home, the loss of the man who had been the steady ground for her for so long. She had broken the foundation, and now it was collapsing. I looked at her, at the woman who was a stranger to me, and I felt nothing at all. I opened the door, and as I stepped out into the cold, I didn't look back. The door closed behind me with a quiet, final click. And the sound was not the end of a love story. It was the sound of a new beginning. The goodbye was not a conversation. It was a series of silent, deliberate actions. I came back the next day, while she was at work, and I packed. I didn't pack everything. I packed the things that were mine, my books, my clothes, my old vinyl records. I left the rest. I left the furniture we had picked out together. I left the art we had bought. I left the memories. I left it all behind. Not because I was angry, but because they were no longer mine. They were relics of a past that was not mine anymore, a past that had been built on a lie. The apartment, once a home, was now a hollow shell, a museum of a relationship that had died a long, quiet, painful death. I packed my car, and as I drove away, I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything at all. The quiet, surgical detachment I had been practicing had become a part of me, a part of my identity. I was a structural engineer of my own life, and I was rebuilding, brick by brick, piece by piece, a new foundation. I moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment downtown. It was an empty space, a blank canvas. There were no ghosts here, no memories, no relics of a past that was not mine anymore. It was just a space, a place where I could start over. The first night in my new home, I sat on the floor, the only furniture a stack of moving boxes, and I ate a pizza. It was a strange, lonely meal, but it was a meal that was mine. There was no ghost of Lila across the table, no ghost of the woman who had laughed and loved and lied. There was just me, and for the first time in a very long time, it was enough. I started to rebuild my life, not with a grand gesture, but with small, quiet steps. I started going to the gym. I started cooking for myself again. I started reading the books I had always wanted to read. I started to talk to Ethan Vaughn more often, and we would just sit and talk, not about my past, but about my present, about my future. He never asked about her. He never mentioned her name. He just listened, and his quiet, steady presence was a comfort, a lifeline in the storm. The self-healing was not a linear process. There were days when the grief would hit me like a wave, and I would find myself on the floor, the tears a hot, painful stream, the memories of her, the woman I thought she was, a fresh wound. But then, there were days when I would feel a moment of clarity, a small, quiet moment of peace. I'd be walking down the street, and I'd see a couple holding hands, and I wouldn't feel a pang of jealousy or a stab of pain. I'd just see them, two people, and I'd feel a strange, detached calm. It was not a sign that I was over it. It was a sign that I was starting to heal. I started to think about the nature of love, of relationships, of betrayal. I realized that the greatest lie was not the lie she had told me. It was the lie I had told myself, the lie that love was a thing of permanence, a thing of stability, a thing that was impervious to the slow, quiet erosion of time, and doubt, and lies. Love was a fragile thing, a beautiful thing, but a thing that had to be tended to, cared for, protected, and I had not protected it. I had been too busy being the steady ground, too busy being the fixer, the man who held things up. I had not been a partner. I had been a monument, and monuments, no matter how grand, can be forgotten, can be left to crumble in the wind. The final, quiet moment of my healing came on a Friday night. I was sitting on my new couch, a cheap, comfortable piece of furniture I had bought from a second-hand store. I was listening to music, the kind of music that reminded me of my own identity, the person I was before Lila. I was reading a book, and I felt a small, quiet moment of peace. It was not the grand, theatrical peace of a man who had triumphed over his betrayal. It was the quiet, understated peace of a man who had survived, a man who had lost everything, but had found himself in the process. The pain was still there, a dull ache in my heart, a ghost I had to learn to live with. But it was not a pain that defined me. It was a pain that had shaped me, a pain that had taught me a profound, devastating lesson. And in that moment, I realized that I was not a victim. I was a survivor, and for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. It was not a grand, theatrical smile. It was a small, quiet, understated smile of a man who had finally found his way home. The journey of healing wasn't a sprint. It was a slow, deliberate march through a landscape of emotional rubble. I found myself becoming a student of my own life, meticulously cataloging the debris. The first few months were a strange mix of profound emptiness and overwhelming detail. My new apartment, the one with the blank walls and the smell of fresh paint, became my sanctuary. It was a place where I didn't have to perform. I could sit in silence, and the silence was not a heavy, pregnant thing, but a clean, empty space. I started to reconnect with the world on my own terms. I went to a movie by myself, the first time in a decade. I walked through the park, not as part of a pair, but as a singular entity. The world, once a backdrop for our shared story, became a place I could explore, a place I could discover on my own. I started to notice things I had never noticed before. The way the light hit a particular tree at dusk, the sound of a train passing in the distance, the smell of rain on asphalt. These were small, insignificant details, but they were my details. They belonged to me. The healing was not about forgetting Lila Montgomery. It was about remembering Liam Thatcher. I had spent so long as a part of a pair that I had forgotten what it was to be an individual. I had poured my identity into the foundation of our life, and when it collapsed, a part of me collapsed with it. I had to learn how to be a person again. I started a new project at work, a challenging one that required my full, undivided attention. It was a bridge project, a massive, complex structure that spanned a river, a beautiful, daunting task of holding things together against impossible odds. The irony was not lost on me. I was building a physical bridge while my emotional one was in a state of ruin. The work was a comfort. It was a place where things made sense, where logic and order prevailed, where there were no lies, no deceit, no quiet betrayals. It was a place where I was good, where I was in control. My friendship with Ethan Vaughn deepened. We would still meet for coffee, but the conversations were different now. He was not just an anchor in the storm, he was a fellow traveler, a friend who had seen me at my worst and didn't flinch. We would talk about our lives, our hopes, our fears. He never mentioned her name, and I never brought it up. Our friendship was a new foundation, a new bridge I was building. A bridge of trust, and honesty, and shared silence. One night, I was sitting on my couch, reading, and my phone buzzed. It was a text message. It was from Lila. It was a simple message, just 2 words. "How are you?" My heart, a thing I had thought was dormant, gave a small, painful lurch in my chest. I stared at the message, the words a tiny, glowing ghost on my screen. I didn't know how to respond. A part of me, a small, desperate part of me, wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to tell her about the grief, the pain, the slow, quiet devastation. I wanted to tell her about the lies, the betrayal, the beautiful, cruel fiction we had lived, but I didn't. I just stared at the message, and I felt the old pain, the old anger, the old confusion come flooding back. But then, a new feeling, a feeling I hadn't felt before, came to me. It was not anger, it was not grief, it was not pain, it was a strange, quiet pity. I pitied her. I pitied the woman who had to live with the wreckage of her own choices, the woman who had to live with the knowledge of what she had done, and the knowledge of what she had lost. She was not a villain. She was just a person who had made a mistake, a person who had chosen a path that led her away from me and away from herself. I put my phone down. I didn't respond. I just went back to my book, and I felt a new kind of peace. It was not the peace of a man who had forgotten, but the peace of a man who had forgiven, not her, but himself. I had forgiven myself for loving her, for believing in her, for building a house on a fault line. I had forgiven myself for not seeing the collapse until it was already happening. The journey of healing was not about revenge. It was about forgiveness. It was about letting go. It was about finding a new way to live, a new way to be. And in that moment, In the quiet of my new home, I realized that I was finally truly free. The silence that had once been my enemy became my greatest ally. It was the silence of a man who no longer had to listen for the sound of a lie, the silence of a man who no longer had to pretend. I found myself reveling in it, a quiet, simple joy that was born of a profound, devastating loss. My new life was a life of small, quiet pleasures, a life of good coffee in the morning, of long, solitary walks in the park, of a book and a glass of wine on a Saturday night. I was not a man who was alone. I was a man who was alone, and I was okay with that. The healing was not a grand, dramatic event. It was a slow, gradual process, a process of rebuilding myself from the ground up, brick by brick, piece by piece. I was not the man I had been. I was a new man, a stronger man, a man who had learned a devastating lesson, a man who had survived a collapse and found his way home. I started to see the world differently, with a new clarity, a new perspective. The world was not a cruel, deceitful place. It was a beautiful, complicated place, a place where people made mistakes, a place where things broke, but a place where things could also be rebuilt. I was a testament to that truth. My work on the new bridge project became my metaphor for life. I was a structural engineer of my own existence, and I was building a new bridge, a bridge of a new life, a bridge of a new me. I was not building it to cross to a new partner, a new love. I was building it to cross to a new me, a me who was whole, a me who was complete on his own. One day, I was sitting in a coffee shop, and I saw a couple across from me. They were young, laughing, and their hands were linked. I looked at them, and I didn't feel a pang of jealousy. I didn't feel a stab of pain. I just saw them, two people, two souls on a journey, and I felt a strange, quiet happiness for them. I hoped their foundation was stronger than mine. I hoped their love was built on something more than a fiction. And in that moment, I realized that my healing was not just about me, it was about them. It was about the hope I had for them, the hope I had for everyone. My friend, Ethan Vaughn, came into the coffee shop and sat down across from me. He didn't ask about my mood. He didn't ask about my day. He just looked at me, and he saw the new me. He saw the peace, the clarity, the quiet strength that had replaced the quiet desperation. He smiled. "You look good, man," he said. I smiled back. "I feel good," I said. It was the truth. The long, quiet, painful journey of my betrayal had not destroyed me. It had transformed me. It had not broken me. It had broken a part of me that needed to be broken. It had broken the part of me that believed in the lie of permanence, the lie of stability, the lie of a love that was impervious to the slow, quiet erosion of time, and doubt, and lies, and in its place, a new part of me had grown, a part of me that was stronger, a part of me that was wiser, a part of me that was whole. And in that moment, I realized that my journey of healing was not over. It was just beginning. It was a journey of a lifetime, a journey of a new me, a new life, a new beginning. My life has a new rhythm now, a different kind of cadence. It's no longer the steady, predictable beat of a shared routine, but something more like jazz. With its unexpected pauses and surprising improvisations, I've found a new kind of contentment in the small, quiet moments of my day. There's a particular kind of peace in waking up in the morning, making a cup of coffee just for myself, and sitting in my living room with no one but my own thoughts. The silence is no longer an echo of an absence, but a welcome space for introspection. I've been spending a lot of time working on my old Honda, a project I'd almost forgotten about in the years I spent building a life with Lila. I've taken the engine apart and put it back together so many times now that it feels like a physical manifestation of my own emotional process. Each bolt I tighten, each part one clean and replace, feels like a small act of self-repair. The car, a beautiful, old machine with a history all its own, is a testament to the fact that things that are broken can be fixed. They may not be the same as they were before, but they can be made new again, with a different kind of strength, A different kind of beauty. The pain of the betrayal is still there, of course. It's a scar now, not a wound. It's a dull ache that surfaces in unexpected moments, a ghost of a memory that flickers in the back of my mind. But it no longer has the power to destroy me. It's just a part of my story, a chapter in the book of my life that I have learned to read without tears. I've started to see Lila Montgomery as a character in that book, not as the protagonist of my life. I've learned to see her not as a villain, but as a person who was flawed, a person who made a mistake, a person who was lost. I have found a strange, quiet empathy for her. I hope she's found what she was looking for. I hope she's found a way to be happy, to be whole, to be at peace with herself. But I don't need to know. Her story is no longer my story. My life is no longer a shared narrative, but a solo journey, and it's a journey I am finally ready to take. My bridge project at work is nearing completion. It's a beautiful, massive structure that stands tall and proud against the skyline, a testament to the fact that things can be built, things can be held up, things can be made to last. I look at it, and I see not just a bridge, but a metaphor for my own life. I see a man who was broken, a man who was lost, a man who was betrayed, but a man who was strong enough to rebuild, and in that moment, I feel a quiet, profound pride. I am a man who has learned to be whole on his own. I am a man who has found a new way to live, a new way to be. I am a man who has found a new kind of love, not for another person, but for myself. I am a man who is finally truly free. My new life, this solo narrative I've been so carefully writing, has its own unique kind of beauty. It's a story without a co-author, without the need for consensus or compromise. It's just me, and the world, and the space between. I've reconnected with old hobbies, found new interests. I've started taking a pottery class on a whim, finding a strange, satisfying kind of therapy in the act of molding clay with my own two hands. The feeling of the wet earth between my fingers, the slow, deliberate shaping of something new. It feels like a physical manifestation of my own inner work. Each pot, each bowl, is a testament to a new beginning, a new form, a new purpose. The past is not forgotten, but it is no longer the main event. It's a backdrop, a memory, a lesson learned. I can look back on my time with Lila Montgomery without the crushing weight of grief. I can remember the good moments, the shared laughter, the small, tender acts of love, and I can see them not as lies, but as a part of a beautiful, complicated, and ultimately flawed story. I can see her not as a villain, but as a person who was on her own journey, a journey that simply took a different path than mine. I have found a new kind of contentment, a quiet, simple joy that is born of a profound, devastating loss. It's a joy that doesn't need to be loud, or grand, or theatrical. It's just a quiet, simple feeling of peace, a feeling of being whole. My new home, the one-bedroom apartment with the blank walls and the smell of fresh paint, is no longer just a space. It's a home. It's a place where I am a man who is living a life that is his own. It's a place where I am a man who is a testament to the fact that things that are broken can be fixed. They may not be the same as they were before, but they can be made new again, with a different kind of strength, a different kind of beauty. I've learned that healing is not about forgetting the past. It's about learning to live with it. It's about finding a way to carry the weight of your memories without letting them crush you. It's about finding a way to be happy, to be whole, to be at peace with yourself, and I am finally there. The last part of my story, the final chapter of my journey, is not a dramatic, triumphant ending, but a quiet, understated beginning. It's a moment of stillness, a moment of clarity, a moment of peace. I am sitting on my new couch, the one with the cheap, comfortable cushions, and I am listening to music, the kind of music that reminds me of my own identity. I am reading a book, and I feel a small, quiet moment of peace. It's not the grand, theatrical peace of a man who has triumphed over his betrayal. It's the quiet, understated peace of a man who has survived, a man who has lost everything, but has found himself in the process. The pain is still there, a dull ache in my heart, a ghost I have to learn to live with. But it is not a pain that defines me, it is a pain that has shaped me, a pain that has taught me a profound, devastating lesson, and in that moment, I realized that my journey of healing is not over. It is just beginning. It is a journey of a lifetime, a journey of a new me, a new life, a new beginning. I am not a man who is defined by his past. I am a man who is defined by his future. I am a man who is a testament to the fact that things that are broken can be fixed. They may not be the same as they were before, but they can be made new again, with a different kind of strength, a different kind of beauty. I have learned to love myself, to trust myself, to be at peace with myself. And in that moment, I realized that I am finally truly free.